This is the story of a quilter, eager to try her hand at machine quilting on a domestic machine, that is, a regular sewing machine. Now, our heroine is no stranger to the quilting universe. She's been quilting for many a decade. But when it comes to actually quilting the quilt, well, when she started out, she did hand quilting. And then she bought a long arm. But alas, that lovely piece of machinery has been sitting idle for many years now, and things have piled around it and upon it. And this was a small quilt, a mere large square that certainly she could handle on a domestic machine. It did not go well, folks. But I'm here to tell you that the story does have a happy ending. The first obstacle was the fact that the backing that she had set aside with this quilt top, which happened to be a UFO from, about 8 or 10 years ago, was indeed not actually backing, but instead fabric that was probably going to turn into a bag of some sort. But that's okay. She had a piece of fabric in her stash that would make a perfect quilt backing, as it was fabric that was used in the front of the quilt. The next step, of course, was to baste the quilt. How should she do that? After consulting the quilting verse on YouTube, she decided that pin basting was going to be the best method. She had safety pins, so yay. But after safety pinning and doing that first line of stitching, alas, the backing was just not taut enough to satisfy her, and the backing was starting to ripple, and she knew that continuing in this manner would be ill-fated. So she took out all the pins, taped down the backing fabric with painter's tape, and tried to pin again. But alas, even that seemed to not be tight enough to stretch the back. So it was time to thread baste. Plenty of thread and a lovely curved needle were going to make this an easy task, or so she thought. But she soon realized that even this was just not quite going to do it. And then she remembered. After being on the struggle bus yesterday with basting this small quilt so that I can quilt it on my domestic machine, I have a solution. I just couldn't get the backing to be taut enough so that when I was putting it through the machine, even though I was starting in the center and working my way outward through to all four corners, it just caused there just wasn't enough tension on the fabric to have a nice smooth transition. Also, I was using embroidery thread in both the bobbin and on the top, and I think I'm going to scrap that plan and go with regular sewing thread in a lovely color. I have no shortage of colors of thread. So here is my solution. I dug up in the bowels of my house my old Q-snap frame. Now, back when I started quilting, machine quilting, whether on a domestic machine or, oh my gosh, a long arm, was not taboo, but you were looked down upon if you were not hand quilting. Yeah, there was an era where that was the case, and it wasn't that long ago. So I had this Q-snap frame, which I'll show you in just a moment, and it's a fairly large, it looks like it's maybe 24 by 36. I couldn't find all the pieces, but yay, I have all the pieces that I need to do the top. I just don't have the legs. So it would stand on a frame that you would be able to, put a chair under it and then sit there and hand quilt. I'm not planning to hand quilt. I'm going to hand baste and then take it to the machine and do the machine quilting. That's the plan. And this is why I don't throw anything away, right? So I had already started to baste it, I had already started to thread baste it, third time round here of playing with it. And I had pin basted it at first. And then I thought, well, if I thread baste it, I can keep pushing it out and anything. But again, the back just wasn't taut. So here's the edge of it. I know you really can't see much. I'm going to change the camera angle in just a moment. But it's a PVC pipe frame with these pieces that snap onto, hence the Q-snap, to the edge. And then you can kind of rotate them slightly to tension things up. So let me change the camera angle and you'll get a better understanding of what the heck I'm talking about. All right, so here is the corner of the frame. So underneath there, it's a full PVC pipe and a little corner thing. There's a third connector going straight down that would lead to a leg. I mean, that's where you would attach a leg. I still have two pieces, but there's 4 legs and there's a crossbar, and yeah, I don't have those things. Anyway, that's fine because I have all the important pieces. So you can see here and here on the side are the parts that snap onto the pipe, and then I could, increase the tension by kind of rolling that back a little bit. But I'm going to carefully here without knocking the camera. But here is the back. It is perfectly smooth and taut and just how I would like it to be. And looks like the basting that I did is fine. So I'm going to continue to circle out basting. So the whole quilt does not fit into the frame because the quilt itself is a little over 36 inches, I guess. But thankfully, because I had that basted already, I didn't have to worry about aligning things. Well, no, it's probably a 36-inch square quilt. So, yeah, I'm going to baste as much of it as I can here on this part, and then I will probably move it to baste the last little bit that doesn't fit since it's only 24 inches in this direction. All right, let's do that. So indeed, she thread basted the entire thing with the backing held tight. And then she began doing an echo quilting of the lines. It was lovely. She looked at the back. It was smooth. This was going to work. She stitched heartily for hours, barely taking a break. And at long last, the last stitches were sewn. She lay the quilt on her cutting table, slid the rotary cutter along the ruler to trim the edges. And when she was done, she realized, oh no, it wasn't laying flat. So one small issue is that it doesn't lay flat, and not even like pretty close to flat. As you can see, this huge bubble here. This is the back. I'm very pleased with how the quilting came out, so score 1 for that. But I'm not sure whether the issue is that the quilt top was not square, that it was a little wobbly. That's a possibility. I didn't actually measure it before I quilted it. It will not be a wall hanging because it does not lay flat, but I think if I kind of lay it over the top of a sofa, it'll be just fine, especially if the sofa has a slightly rounded back. So now that I have had some time to really think about it, like I slept on it, and what is its fate? So as I mentioned, I'm really happy with the quilting. But obviously there was an issue that has caused it to, bubble somewhat. And often I would find that happening when I was long arming other people's quilts, is that their quilt wasn't square. I think my quilt was pretty square. Now, I don't 100% know that because I did not measure it all the way across and back and forth and all that good stuff to see if indeed it was square. But I think the real issue was that in the center here are bias triangles. And there's a bias triangle just like this on each side because, it's a big star. And I think that especially on the last section that I was quilting, I noticed that it really wasn't quite a 90-degree angle. And I'm thinking that I was really stretching that particular piece. So, that's how it goes. I don't think I'm going to bind it. I think I'm going to hold off because it could end up being a piece of quilted fabric that I make into a bag or into a dog bed or a cat bed, or it's not enough fabric to really make a jacket, but something. It could become something. So I'm not going to bind it. Lesson learned. I'm going to, when I go to baste my next one, because, I have a stack of unfinished quilt projects, then I will know better to check my measurements. And then I have another quilt that is exactly like this design, different colors. And I will stabilize those bias triangles before I quilt them. So that is the happy ending. While it's not usable in its current state, I still chalk it up as a win. And I think that's an important lesson, that when you are exploring your creativity and you are quilting or embroidering or knitting or whatever your craft is, and you run into an issue and it just doesn't turn out the way that you want, one of the outcomes is that you just learn something from it so that you move on. And this has not at all discouraged me from using my home sewing machine to do these smaller quilting projects. So I'm pretty excited. I don't know whether I'll start the next one this week. I've got some other things brewing that I'm anxious to get to. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm excited. So let me know down in the comments whether you have had a quilting fail, and really, was it a failure? What lesson did you learn from it? I'm Stacy, and I look forward to sharing with you my adventures in crafting. Bye.